Everything you would want to understand about human experience, human potential, is contained within those three elements.
What's a big difference in results or implications between this and cognitive behavior therapy?
One of the things about the principles that fascinated me was the idea that negative dysfunctional thought didn't have to be a problem. Almost every other psychology I've come across, if you're suffering, the problem is that you have dysfunctional negative thought. Whereas the principle says, no, it's perfectly natural to have all different kinds of thoughts, right? Like for me, I'll ruminate, but I know I'm ruminating and I'm not thinking clearly. I get a lot of gratification out of it, but I don't get the negative effects because I know I'm not thinking clearly, so I don't use it as a guide to reality. So that's the part that's really got my attention, is the potential to have a completely different experience of yourself, your life, this reality, other people, your job, with less effort and more good things.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So does it mean human beings only experience thought all the time?
How can I know what's outside of my perception? How could I know that? The reality is, I'm experiencing my mind through my quality of thought, and it feels like it's coming from outside of me.
That fundamentally sounds a little bit like a religious standpoint.
This is a cosmic cruelty. If I have an insecure thought that maybe you're not trustworthy.
Very unreasonable thought, by the way.
Agreed. The thoughts that we react to the most, we get two negative effects. We get more of them, and we're hypervigilant to them, so we feel like we get more of them.
How should mental health treatment fundamentally change?
I was being paid to understand it, to do an analytical comparison. The answer to mental health is to discover the unconditional, non-circumstantial potential we have for well-being in the face of any kind of thinking.
Is free will real?
I could sit and think about that for days, but I'd rather just not think about it and enjoy my life. The things that people love to do are the things they do with less on their mind. And for some people it's playing sports, and for some people it's sitting in the park, and for some people it's gardening, and some it's cooking. The thing that they all have in common is that's the time where they're not thinking, they're not processing.
Dr. Aaron Turner, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
My first question is, what are those three principles?
Well, the three principles is a term that Sydney Banks used to describe the understanding of human experience, the mind, and reality that he tried to share, which was a huge departure from what existed generally in the world before he shared that. So it's just a way of talking about an understanding, and it refers to three principles because there are three aspects to that understanding. And what's cool about it is everything you would want to understand about human experience, human potential, is contained within those three elements. And the way I think about it, I'm not going to tell people that's what it is, but the way I think about it is there's the nature of the mind, which is a way of talking about what's behind the mind, what's the essence of the energy behind what we're experiencing. And that's something that's really important to consider, because the way you understand the nature of the mind will determine the kind of potential you think you have, right? Now, you might have a tremendous potential, but if you don't think you have it, you can't have it. You have it, but you can't have it. So it's huge to really reconsider the nature of the mind. And before I came across the principles, without consciously deciding what I thought the nature of the mind is, I had a whole bunch of assumptions about what the nature of the mind was. And as a result, at age 18, I'd come to conclusions about what my limits were. I wasn't a social person. I was going to be anxious. I couldn't be happy. Didn't bother me. I wasn't upset. But I'd already come to a conclusion because I'd made assumptions about the nature of the mind, or more specifically, the nature of Aaron Turner's mind. So that principle of mind helps us reconsider what we're made of, what's behind our experience, what's possible for us. And that's a really cool thing to reconsider, because we grow up coming to an assumption without even choosing it. So
and mind means soul, means identity?
Yeah, so the truth is we don't know what it means, but it points to the nature of the energy behind life. So for a human being, that you could talk about that as the soul, you could talk about that as the essence, you could talk about that as the energy of consciousness. But yes, whatever that fundamental essence is that animates and enlivens and allows our consciousness, allows us to think, allows us to exist. And the nice thing about that is it's something we can consider the nature of, but what I've come to the conclusion of is that we can see the symptoms of its nature and potential, but I don't think we'll see the full depth of it, because it's not particularly visible. Just the results of it are visible. So then there's the idea of thought, which is thought is the way we experience our mind, right? So we're experiencing a thought-created version of the mind, which is why the mind has a nature that doesn't change, but our experience goes up and down. Good moods, bad moods, well-being, insecurity, caring, hatred, etc., etc. And consciousness is a way of talking about the fact that we're aware. So there could be something in this room that I'm completely unaware of. And actually, if I got obsessed with a pain in my knee, I might lose awareness of you. So the truth is, we're aware of something, and the something we're aware of is thought, and thought is the way we experience the power and the nature of the potential of mind. So what I've come to appreciate over the last 30 years is that this is a really freeing and enabling understanding if you go back to it. Because our experience of life doesn't feel like it comes down to these three elements. But maybe during this conversation, we'll get to see, well, if you consider that it does, what freedoms and benefits that you get that you don't get if you don't consider that it comes down to these principles.
I'm already so excited to go to a deep dive. But maybe for now, for the start, and for everybody who never heard of three principles.
Yes.
There's this internet Reddit thing. Explain it like I'm 5.
Yes.
Can you try to break it down even more?
Yeah, I can explain it like this is the way. I'll explain it. You tell me what age it's for, and we can go up or down.
Wonderful.
Okay. So basically, we're considering that although it feels like we're experiencing the world around us, we're actually experiencing our mind. Our awareness is an awareness of the mind. So if you wanted to explain it to a 5-year-old, say, look, we're experiencing our mind because we experience thought. When we have happy thought, we experience happiness. When we have sad thought, we experience sadness. When we have insecure thought, we experience insecurity. And when we have those feelings, we see a reality consistent with those feelings. Right? So someone who's really low doesn't see a lot of potential. Someone who's got a lot of energy and inspiration sees a lot of potential. In my home life, because I live with my family, when my feelings are negative, I see people that are annoying. I mean, even when I'm on the subway, so I live in London, I go on the tube. When I'm impatient and rushed, everybody on the tube is annoying. Well, most people are, because they're going too slow, or they're too close, or they didn't wash well enough, or right? But when my mind's freer and I feel good, I like those people. And the most fascinating thing that I've noticed is if I'm rushing and I'm a little bit edgy and people are bothering me, it really is upsetting if someone pushes into me.
Right.
But if I feel better and they push into me, a lot of times I don't even notice. And if I do notice, I'm more worried about them than I am myself, because it doesn't bother me. And then you start to see, oh, we're experiencing everything consistent with the thoughts we have. So like, oh, you're bothering me. But that's nothing to do with you, because if I was having a different thought, if I was in a different feeling, it might not bother me at all. It might actually be amusing, or I might not even notice, or I might find it interesting.
So that sounds like I'm not experiencing anything out there, whatever out there means, circumstance.
Yeah.
But I'm experiencing thought.
Mm-hmm.
So does it mean human beings only experience thought all the time?
Yeah, exactly. And thought is the vehicle of experience. So it's like, thought gives us the ability to have an experience. So in order to see the difference between you and what's behind you, I have to be able to distinguish. And to distinguish, thought does that for me.
Right.
But I have to learn that. I have to, right? So not only does thought allow me to see you, it determines whether I like what I see. And what's really interesting is if you don't hold on to it, it moves around.
Yeah.
You know, so like when my kids were younger, they'd say, I hate you, Daddy. I don't want to play with you again. And then 2 minutes later, hey, let's go play football. But
Right.
as adults, we learn to hang on to thoughts, so we don't see as much of that natural fluctuation that you see in kids.
Yeah, it's interesting, this correlation between like grabbing onto and it being less able to move. So looking forward to going there with you as well. But one question that came up right now is, who am I in that sentence of the,
Oh gosh.
when you said that through thought you see me, but it's not only do you see me, thought determines what you see, and if it's going to be nice or ugly and or interesting or boring. What role do I play if everything you experience is thought?
Well, yeah, you don't really. You don't really. In other words, I'm going to have a whole host of thought experiences of you, and I'm going to decide which ones to live by.
Right. So does it even matter to your experience if I'm even here or not? It seems to matter. Like if nobody would be there where you would be sitting, it seems there would be different things going on here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you'd be having a thought-created experience of different things.
Right.
But sometimes,
Right.
and I see this on the tube as well, it's like, it's not common for someone to be having a thought experience of the tube ride to work. If you go on the tube, have a look. Most people are having a thought experience of something else. They're distracted, or they're daydreaming, or they're thinking about their phone, or they're thinking about the past, or they're thinking about the future. So just because we're here now doesn't mean you'll be having a thought experience of now. But in order to have a thought experience of now, you have to have thought. And it is a really interesting thing. I don't know if we'll get into this, but when we're not distracted by our own, I don't know, what I would call analysis, our mind creates a thought experience of the moment we're in. That's what people mean by being in the moment. That's what being present is. Being present is having a mind that's free to create an experience of this moment with an undistracted bandwidth. Now, here's the interesting thing. The less distracted you are, the more the full bandwidth of your mind is giving you an experience of right now, the richer that experience will be. So if I'm with you and I'm kind of thinking about what I'm going to do later, it'll be fairly unengaging. It might even be boring. Now, that's not you. That's because I've only got half a bandwidth, which only gives me so much quality of experience of right now. And if I got nothing on my mind, because someone said to me in a training, well, Aaron, are you trying to tell me that having the sun on my face doesn't feel good? And I was thinking, well, how am I going to answer this? So the thought popped into my head. I said, okay, think of how many times you've enjoyed having the sun on your face. Just ballpark it. And then ballpark how many times the sun has been on your face. This could be a radically different number, isn't it? You know, right? Because the times where we've had the sun on our face and we've been undistracted enough to really fill fully up with that experience and really appreciate it, that's the power that the mind gives us to have an experience of what's in front of us in a very rich way, in a very we could have one of those conversations where people say, God, that conversation was great.
So are you saying that this immersion in the present is what actually felt good, and it doesn't really matter if it's the sun or rain or anything else?
I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, it's a full open bandwidth experience. As you start eating that bandwidth up with having things on your mind, you're taking away from the richness of the experience that your mind can create of what's happening right now, and also of the potential of the mind itself. Which is why it's quite interesting, when we talk to groups, the things that people love to do are the things they do with less on their mind. And for some people, it's playing sports, and for some people, it's sitting in the park, and for some people, it's gardening, and some it's cooking. But the thing that they all have in common is that's the time where they're not thinking, they're not processing.
I wonder, before we go and move on to every single bit of that, what's the biggest difference from, I know there are therapists that are kind of guided by this understanding, coaches, schools, and social workers. What's a big difference, maybe in results or implications, between this and on the one hand, cognitive therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and on the other hand, like other spiritual teachings, like maybe Eckhart Tolle or non-duality and whatever else there is?
Well, I'm only going to answer that question, Michael, on the basis that you and everybody else watching understand it's being answered on limited knowledge. You know how they say,
Deal.
Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So there's two major differences that I understand between this and cognitive work. They're both fairly significant, but one is much more significant. The least significant one is, there's three actually. Three differences. So
Three principles.
There's three principal differences. So the first one is that I'll start with the and get more and more significant. The first one is, it's my understanding that cognitive work tries to help people get a more logical appreciation of their emotive thinking, right? And to do that, sometimes they compare it to reality. Look, is this a realistic thought? Now, from the three principles point of view, the idea of comparing a thought to something outside a thought is ridiculous. Because the way you and I see reality is totally different. So that how can a person that's experiencing reality through thought access reality outside of the way they're seeing it? I mean, it makes no sense. So that's the least significant one, but that's a huge difference. Like I had a.
So seeing a human being in front of me is in no way more realistic than seeing a unicorn.
Well, it is more realistic, but the idea of having access to a reality outside of your perception is ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
Right? How can I know what's outside of my perception? How could I know that? Now, I do agree that, yes, it's way more likely you're a person than a unicorn. I do agree with that.
Good.
Yeah. But on a really scientific level,
right?
How could an individual know what reality is beyond their perception? It's got to be imaginary. Okay, but that's not the most significant. The second, now we're getting more significant, is one of the things about the principles that fascinated me was the idea that negative dysfunctional thought didn't have to be a problem. Almost every other psychology I've come across, if you're suffering, the problem is that you have dysfunctional negative thought, and we got to get you to do something about it or do something about it. We got to get in on that. Right. Whereas the principle says, no, it's perfectly natural to have all different kinds of thoughts. The problem is the reaction to the thought. The problem is an unhealthy relationship to the thought. And that idea that you can have a healthy relationship to the most unhealthy thoughts fascinated me. Fascinated me. Because you don't have to get rid of the thought. Whereas cognitive theory is all about doing something with the thought. Now, from a principles perspective, which is interesting, you say, well, what's a healthier relationship to thought? Well, not mistaking it for reality and taking it too seriously. So like I've worked as a counselor for 10 years, as well as what I do now. And when I worked with someone that had an anxiety disorder, they didn't struggle with anger. Right? You got these two negative thoughts, both feel bad, both equally, dysfunctional. Why is the anxiety disorder person struggle with anxiety and the anger management person struggle with anger? Well, that's the one they're taking seriously. And if you say to someone with anxiety, well, why do you want to get rid of anxiety? It's uncomfortable and it's painful. Well, what about other uncomfortable, painful thoughts? Well, what do you mean? Like what? Well, like anger. Oh, I don't worry about anger. Right? Then you ask the anger management person, well, why don't you not worry about your anger? Are you crazy? Do you know how strong it is? Well, don't you have other strong negative feelings? Not really. Well, what about anxiety? Well, yeah, I have that. Well, what do you do about that? Oh, I don't worry about that. So it's highlighted the fact that we can have a healthy relationship to any thought or an unhealthy relationship to any thought. And what I've noticed is the ones that we're most concerned about, the ones that we take most seriously, are the ones that are a problem for us. For me, that was anxiety, insecurity, self-consciousness, right? Now,
so are you saying the engagement, the mental engagement of it is what makes it big?
No, it's more like, it's not the mental engagement. The mental engagement, if you engaged with a thought that you considered ridiculous, it wouldn't have a harmful effect. Right? Like for me, I'll ruminate, but I know I'm ruminating and I'm not thinking clearly. I get a lot of gratification out of it, but I don't get the negative effects, right? Because I know I'm not thinking clearly, so I don't use it as a guide to reality.
Right.
See?
And would you say like the reason people do it with specific topics is it doesn't play any role with it? Like one counter argument might sound like it's easy to say to, not take it seriously or take it as reality when you have it like once a year, once a month.
Yes.
But if you would have it every day,
I know.
That would be that. What do you say regarding that?
Well, so I would say to the person something different than I would say to you.
Well,
but to you, what I would say is, this is a cosmic cruelty. The thoughts that we react to the most, we get two negative effects. We get more of them, and we're hypervigilant to them, so we feel like we get more of them. Right? So I could not get rid of anxiety because I was hypervigilant. I was expecting it all the time, so I was halfway to having it all the time. I was leaning that way. And then when I had it, I was so concerned I had it, I was kind of monitoring it all the time. Right. So what I've noticed is when people see, what sits behind not taking a thought so seriously is understanding that it is a thought, that it feels more real and dangerous than it is, and that all thoughts are the same until we treat them differently. Right. Now, when people really, and there's one more which I'll come to.
Yeah.
But when people really understand that, plus the one more, they start to realize that they're taking something seriously that doesn't really deserve it. You can't tell someone, like people said, well, how do you not take anxiety seriously? Well, if you think anxiety is serious or relevant or significant or informative,
Right.
you have to take it seriously. What we're helping people see is that's a misunderstanding, because if you have anxiety, it means you don't have clear thought. And if you don't have clear thought, all you're getting is pain and confusion.
Mm-hmm.
So unless your goal is pain and confusion, you're not getting anything you want from taking it seriously. So sometimes people say, well, I can solve my problems. Well, if you don't have a clear mind, it makes it very difficult to solve your problems. Well, I'll be motivated. Well, it does appear that way, but we can get more in depth to that. Turns out that's not really actually true either. There's a way in which we don't appreciate that our feelings are telling us when our mind is deep and clear enough to be useful, or all flustered and distorted and agitated and reactive, in which case it claims to be useful, but actually it's dysfunctional, right? And knowing the difference allows us to know, it's kind of like knowing the nutrition of your food, knowing the clarity of your thought. And that's what sits behind whether you take it seriously. So like I've had an anger management client that on the first day when I said, well, look, this is early on in my career where I just sat down and told people, don't take it so seriously. I didn't realize there was an understanding behind it.
Right.
And he basically said, how do you not take it seriously? Whereas 2 weeks later, when he was back at work and he wasn't reacting to things, and I asked him, why didn't you get angry? And he said, why would I? That's a shift in understanding. How do you not? To why would I?
It sounds like this working with this understanding, or being worked on, like being worked with, kind of requires a lot from people in the sense of changing the whole worldview. It's kind of a philosophical, deep change, because it's not a technique or something you kind of do and then you can measure the results, and doesn't really touch your worldview and how you perceive everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it isn't that really, Michael.
Okay.
It's more scientific. That's the way I approached it. It's more scientific. So when I came across it, I'm like, oh, okay. So here's the third thing that's different from cognitive therapy, and then I'll move on and answer that question. The third one is the nature of the mind. With that idea of the nature of the mind, is that the nature of the mind is mentally healthy. That the richer, deeper, more content feelings come from the nature of the mind. They're not created by thought. They're just communicated through thought, or they're just, mediated by thought. And that there's a deep intelligence and well-being built into the nature of the mind. Now that, as far as I know, is not in cognitive psychology at all. No. And there's a growing research to show that the degree to which you consider that you have an innate health and potential within you in itself has a mental health benefit. Right?
Looking forward to for you to send it to me if you could. I'll link it.
Yeah, well. Great. Scientific. So the way I approached it was like, okay, in a way, it's being willing to take a fresh look at what's real, not in order to change it, but just to give it, like a spring clean. All right. What if the nature of our mind is a profound intelligence and a depth of well-being? What if? That's what I thought. I was like, well, if that's true, then why am I experiencing so much chronic anxiety? Well, I said, well, let's put that to the side and we'll come to that. But what if that's true? I was like, well, that would be a radically different idea from what I'm currently proceeding with. And my job was not to change my mind or agree with it. It was just to have an open mind about it. And you know what I started to see? when I had less on my mind, I felt better. And I always had. Like when I was chronically anxious, and I wasn't seriously, well, I didn't think I was, I think I might have had a high pain tolerance, but I didn't think I was chronically anxious. But, you know, every couple of years I'd have this just rush of deep gratitude and contentment wash over me out of nowhere.
Right.
And I would think, God, this feels amazing. And then my assumptions about reality would kick in. I'd be like, yeah, well, pity it's not realistic anyway. And then I'd get back to my normal thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when I was at university, I would read the essay question and then walk home to the accommodation without thinking about it. And the structure would pop into my head on the way home, right? The things I love to do in my life were all things you can't do when you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Martial arts and improvising.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I thought I loved improvising and I loved martial arts. I didn't realize I loved having a free mind. And because I didn't understand that, I was addicted to those things because I thought that's where the feeling came from. I didn't realize it was coming from me because I didn't get the chance to consider, what if it's coming from me? It never occurred to me.
That's very interesting. Again, we're kind of stuck in the not deep dive yet, but because it's so interesting already.
It's really pretty deep to me.
You know, I'll still kind of repeat the point. It seems to me that it kind of requires a lot from people. Like, you were open to inquire honestly what's true about your worldview, about
Yes.
deep questions about what's going on.
Yes.
I'm not sure everybody or most people or how many people even at all are open to radically be honest to themselves to see what happens.
But I'd tell you something interesting, Michael. I wasn't.
Hmm.
So my aunt and uncle were interested for me to get interested in this, and I wasn't. I went to trainings. I thought they were stupid. I was not open.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle paid me to research and compare these principles to other psychological theories. I was not personally interested at all.
Mm-hmm.
I was being paid to understand it, to do an analytical comparison.
Mm.
And in the process, I had to understand it to compare it. And I started to see what was happening in my mind. See, I think because Sydney Banks discovered something that's true, when you come across it, you start to see it because it's an unconscious part of our life. But as soon as you start talking about it, you start to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And in a way, I mean, yes, it's great if you're interested and you're open, it makes it a lot easier. But you don't need to change anything because I'll tell you a really funny example. So I was asked to be on the faculty of a senior army leadership training.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a week-long program. And each day my job was to get up and talk about what we call state of mind, which is what the principles point to, like we're experiencing our state of mind, right? Mm. So the first day I get up and I say to them, well, I'm going to be talking about state of mind. They all go, oh my God. And I'm like, well, what? You know, what's wrong? And they're like, if you think we can learn anything about clarity of mind from a civilian, you're out of your mind. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, what if there's something new here? They're like, we absolutely know there's not. So next. I said, and it suddenly dawned on me that, look, you might be right, but you might not be right. So I said to them, look, if you don't listen, you're wasting your time. But if you listen, you'll either find out you were right and it was a complete waste of time, but you'll know that for sure. So you can tick that off your list. Anytime anyone mentions this again, you'll know, yeah, I listened. We already know that. And if there's something new, you'll find it. So there's no point not listening. So they said to me, well, I tell you what, we'll listen, but we don't want you manipulating us. I said, well, what do you mean? They said, we don't want you talking us into it. We don't want you manipulating. I said, okay, cool. And I'd never done this before because I think the power of this understanding is so freeing and enabling. I was selling it to people. Like I was, this is really important and this is why. And, and they said, just lay it out. I said, okay, I can do that. If that's what it takes, I'll just lay it out. That training was one of the most impactful things I've ever done, because I just laid out what the facts as I saw them, and they were the judge of it. And I think because it's true, when you consider it, you'll see the part that works for you, right? Which really educated me about it. It's like, oh, you're just asking someone to take a look. They'll see what's true. You're not trying to talk them into it. These principles are a guide to where and how to look at something that's already there that we just don't understand. So we're tripping over it,
I'm intrigued. And you, Aaron, you've been president of the 3P Global Community, which is the global organization of this understanding.
Well, it's a non-profit that was established based on a couple of retreats, but it was kind of one of Sydney Banks's kind of deathbed wishes that there were a number of people that would set up an organization to kind of try to help this understanding be available to people in the world. So I was at those retreats, and I was a founding board member, and it's a non-profit. So it's, building awareness, building relevance, building a community, trying to keep a focus on what these principles are, because it's very easy to add to them or embellish or, develop, whereas actually the power's in the simplicity of it, in my opinion.
Why did you leave or resign?
Well, in the development of the organization, so the organization's developed over the last 16 years. And one of the things that we established about 6 years ago was that there should be board terms, that it shouldn't just be the same people running the whole thing forever. And there should be terms to allow other people to get involved, to allow fresh thinking. And I'd already been the president for 7 years. Right. And the idea was to have a 2-term maximum. So I was kind of responding to the spirit of the board when they said, look, it's because I thought, I've been the president 7 years. According to this philosophy, it's time for some fresh ideas, some fresh thoughts. And when I first became the president, I really wanted to see the organization kind of evolve and develop, and it really has. And so I thought, maybe it's time for somebody else to I don't know, be thinking about that.
How does it feel to be? I mean, if those principles are true, it can't have a feeling, right? Like the fact that you're no longer president there. But I hope you know what I mean.
No, if the principles are right, I'll have a feeling based on my thinking about it. And well, it's been really great, actually. So firstly, the evenings where we tend to have the meetings, I'm having an evening. So that's really nice. I'm like, ooh, this is nice. That's great. And in line with what we're talking about, I'm not thinking about that. No, I'm good. I'm not thinking about that anymore. So, that's kind of freeing as well. So it's been a refreshing change for me. I mean, I loved being a part of it, and I loved thinking about it, and I loved, contributing to looking after it and developing it. But actually, it's been really nice to not be thinking about it as well.
All right. Let me ask you some questions. Let's start with thought. So, what I understood from you is that everything we experience is thought. Is there anything outside of thought?
This is a really facetious way of answering that question, Michael. How would I know? So,
well, you might feel free.
No. What I mean by that is that for me, my experience is created by thought. Right? So I'm assuming there's lots of things outside of thought. Well, my thought. That's a deeper question if there's anything outside of thought, period. But my experience is created by thought. So thought is the way I experience things, like everything, right? So for example, if I have a headache.
It's kind of the substance of experience?
Yeah, it's the medium. It's the medium. So like when you look at a computer screen, you're looking at the results of code. Right? When you're having an experience of life, you're experiencing the results of thought. That's the medium. It's like that's how. So you'll notice that, like for example, let's say you're at work and you feel hungry. I'm suggesting the way you had the awareness of hunger was through a thought, right? Now, just to hammer the point home, if you think about how hungry you are, you get hungry pretty damn quick, right? If you decide you're not going to worry about the fact that you're hungry, you'll eat later, it disappears. Biologically, you're getting hungrier. Biologically, you're actually hungrier,
right?
But you don't feel it because it's not on your mind. So thought is the way we become aware of experience. Like I did a talk at a chronic pain clinic once, and this is what we talked about. Not that you don't have pain, but you experience it through thought. And one of the people in the group said, you know what? The worst part of chronic pain is not the pain, it's all the thinking about the pain. If it was just pain, that would be one thing, but it's the anticipation, the worry, the concern, the pain.
So is there no way to experience reality directly?
As far as I understand it, thought is what allows us to experience reality, which is why if you're looking at something and you start thinking about a memory, you won't see the thing in front of you because you put your thoughts somewhere else.
And there's no way at all to see in front of us. In front as a metaphor for what's up, as in contrast of what's up in thought.
Well, yeah, let me say something and then you tell me if I've misunderstood your question. Because my understanding and my observation, having lived with this understanding and worked with a lot of people, is that it's through thought that an experience is constructed in our awareness. Right? So we're aware of the thought we're having, and the thought is what gives us an awareness of what's in front of us. So for example, I don't know, they're all trite examples, but if you brought a musician in here, they'd see one thing. If you brought a builder in, they'd see something else. You brought a designer in, they'd see something else. You brought a 3-year-old, they'd see something else. So, and they'd see different based off their mood and, whether they were hungry or impatient or...
Right. And I guess lots of people would say, well, there's one real thing and we kind of color this thing through our perception. But what you're saying is something different.
Yeah.
What you're saying is it doesn't have any common point. So this leads to the question, is the reality we experience informed by anything that's objective or true?
Well, oh God, this is kind of a little bit out of my depth here. So that's the disclaimer. I assume that we haven't gone deep enough to talk the second part of this, but the first part of it would be, it seems to me fair to assume that there's some shared reality. Because when I'm not distracted and you're not distracted, if we were to compare notes, it seems that we're having a thought experience of something common. Right? That seems fair to me. Now, for my purposes, that's good enough. Because the part that I'm interested in is I'm interested in people's experience of their life. So how real is the external reality that we all seem to see part, I don't really understand. I don't know. You know, some people say it's completely illusory. Some people say it's completely real. I don't really know. But I have my thoughts about it, but they're not really relevant, because the thing that's relevant is the degree to which people are able to have a generally rich experience of their life versus being caught and stuck in a less rich to painful to debilitating experience of their life. And the thing that's been relevant for me is, because of the innate nature of this well-being, well, I call it clarity, but let's just say well-being and intelligence, it takes no effort to have a richer, clearer, more enabled, more capable experience of this reality, whatever it is.
Right.
Right? And it's always interested me that the normal adult state of mind is not a clear, happy, capable one. It's a somewhat stressed, hanging in there, managing, trying to keep up, ticking things off and not really enjoying it except for the weekends and the things that you like to do. So that means the normal average adult state of mind is not as clear and easy as it could be, and it would be more natural and less effort for it to be that way. So that's the part that's really got my attention, is the potential to have a completely different experience of yourself, your life, this reality, other people, your job, with less effort and more good things.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, because this sounds very attractive. I would guess people open to that and intrigued by that already maybe got into it to a certain degree and love it. And there are people who are currently maybe on their way, and there are part of people
Yes.
who are skeptic.
Yes.
And for those people, before jumping into a new complete worldview and questioning everything, they would love that things first seem to make sense,
Yes,
seem to
totally.
to be kind of
Yes.
even
Yes,
like
totally.
worth touching and
Yes.
worth doing something with. And the thing that I don't really get yet is that if it's really true that we don't have like direct access to truth, and we can't really know what's up, we can't really know what's objective, what's independent on regarding our thinking. So those things you described, this having this direct access, this quicker access to clarity, even the statement itself that we experience thought, if it would be really true, we couldn't know if it would be true. Because if it would be true, we wouldn't have any direct access to any source of objectivity, right? So if you don't have source of objectivity, it would kind of contradict itself, at least it seems to me, because then we couldn't know anything for sure, and then we couldn't know in the first place that everything is thought that we experience.
Well, there are things we can know for sure.
Right.
Right? One is that we're aware, that we're conscious. Right? We can know that. We can come to more of an appreciation that we're conscious of the thought we're having. We can come to more appreciation of the fact that the thought we're having feels real, but is essentially transitory and fluctuating. We can come to more appreciation of the fact that underneath that thought is an ever-present potential for a deeper, clearer state of mind in which we feel more alive and content and appreciative of ourselves and our reality, and the thoughts we have about the reality that we're in tend to take people in a much better direction.
Right.
It's a really interesting thing. Like one of the things that I've learned from working in businesses is when people have a shift in clarity, it's almost like an engineering project. You see people have a shift in clarity, then you get to see all the things that change in a business as a result, and you realize, oh, those were connected. The less clear, the more dysfunctional the thinking, you get these problems. You get clearer thinking, you don't get these problems. And they're always the problems that businesses can't solve because they're the problems that were caused by the state of mind, which they didn't address.
Which seems like good evidence. It seems to make sense, and that's why I'm kind of inquiring.
Yeah.
All those things you listed out, which we can know, isn't the only medium through which we can know thought?
Yes.
So are we... Isn't the only way in the three principles view...
Well, my understanding of it.
Or in your understanding, that we would know that we are conscious by thought?
Yes.
So, and per definition, it's so we can't know what's real. We have a dynamic where all I can experience is thought, but that I only experience thought, that I know for sure is real. I don't get the jump. You know what? Maybe I speak of it weirdly, but
well, I think I understand you, but you can tell me.
Yeah.
See, so I have to kind of recalibrate the way I would say that to be in line with what you're saying, to kind of to be a bit more linked to what you're saying, and it might not because. So there's two things to say, Michael. One is what you just what you just said is a good example of how we can think ourselves into confusion, right? So we can do that, right? Now, let's take what you said as a given, right? That we only experiencing thoughts, so we only know, right? Okay. And let's take that as a given, right? Say, well, that's the situation. Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that when people feel more at ease and less uncomfortable, the thought they have works really well in their life and for them. Now, how objectively true it is, we've already established. Nobody knows. Right? We just know that when people have a clearer feeling, their relationship at home deepens, they enjoy it more, they're better parents, their kids are more functional, they do better at work, the company that they're in does better, they spend less time getting more done, so they leave the office earlier, but they get more done. So
how do you know though? Like, is this just by your own experience?
Well, this is consistently what people say when we follow up with them.
I see. So, but the only way they would know and you would know by them is thought as well, right?
Yeah. Well, we could even say it that way, Michael. We could say that here are some consistent patterns in the illusion of thought.
Okay.
Right? So let's just say it that way. And actually, that's probably a better way to say it. It's like in the human experience in the illusion of thought, here are some patterns we've noticed.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And some of the patterns that we've noticed is that the beneficial versus the destructive effects of people's thought varies with their feeling in this illusion of thought experience of life, right? So that when people feel more agitated, to the degree that they feel more agitated, they experience more pain, self-reported. They look uneasier, but that's my illusion of thought, so we'll take that one off.
Right.
And they self-report in their illusion of their illusion that they are less stressed, less strained, they're not trying as hard, but things are working out better for them. Thoughts that seem to be useful are coming to them more easily. And they never knew it could be like this, right? And as their level of, I don't know which way to do it, but as their level of distress increases, they report more pain, they report trying harder to help themselves with no useful results, they report trying to figure things out with less and less useful results, increased experience of tension and problems in their relationships and with their families, etc., etc., etc. Now, I've seen this trend over and over again. So even, and I do agree with you. Let's say that human beings are living in the illusion of the reality of their own thinking, even though there does seem to be some common to what they're having a thought experience about, right?
Which is kind of what coming from you originally, right?
Yeah. So there are patterns within this in terms of the link between the feelings that people have and the way things seem to play out for them. So I work with leaders, sales teams, athletes, individuals, and this pattern replicates.
Right.
Seems to replicate. And ever since I've noticed that, which was when we started working with it, I've been fascinated by it. I've been really fascinated by it. And it's consistent with what the principles point to.
Right.
Like, it wasn't until I came across the principles that I came across the idea that your feelings point to your, I don't know what you'd say, depth of clarity of mind or lack thereof, like your distortion of mind and your clarity of mind. And that kind of got me interested in the link between feelings and the way people's lives play out, both in their experience and in the details, the parts of their lives.
So those principles are fascinating, interesting, have a huge impact. At least
Seems to be.
Seems to be. And definitely not true, right?
Well, my assumption is that they're true.
Oh, okay. So how is that possible? How is it possible if they were true? It would directly mean that you couldn't know if they were, right?
Well, here's my assumption. Right. I'm willing to accept I don't know, but here's my assumption that in life, whatever it is, however it works, that to the degree that you discover something that's true, things will become easier and less confusing. Right? So, for example, every time I've seen someone get an appreciation of what we talked about, that we're experiencing our mind, that's an experience of thought, that thought is kind of creates an experience of things that feels really solid and real, but actually is, there's nothing behind it. And that underneath that is this kind of, I don't know, inbuilt intelligence and, I don't know, richness and depth that we call the essence.
Yeah.
Things seem to get easier with them. That like I've noticed for me, when I forget that I'm experiencing thought and that I have this innate nature, when I forget that, or when I'm struggling and I take a look, I'll have forgotten something along those lines. And if I go back to it, it changes my appreciation of what's going on, and it leads me to have a different relationship to what I'm calling the thought experience, and it allows me to have new thought, and things kind of, I don't know what I would say, but I feel like I get back on track, so I don't feel like I'm stuck in a challenging, unpleasant reality stroke experience. Right. And so it's been my assumption that if you apply the same understanding, like when what I've seen is when this understanding is missing, people struggle. And they struggle in lots of different ways. When they have this understanding, that struggling diminishes, and they seem to do better, right? So
when you say having this understanding, you don't mean necessarily formally by Sydney Banks, but what he was pointing to.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, how many times are we trying to have a different experience by changing our outside world? Like, I don't know how many people who have tried to feel happier by getting their partner to change.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows it doesn't work, but everybody's still trying it. So they must think that their feelings are coming from the other person.
Right.
And what I've seen is when I realized they aren't, all of a sudden I didn't have that problem anymore.
Right. And it definitely sounded like there's a lot of evidence, and a lot of that makes sense. I was hammering maybe a little bit too much just on this truth claim that that you didn't say like that. You just talked about your impression. And again, for that impression, I see the evidence for it.
Yeah.
Just does seem a little bit of self-inflicted damage, like proposing, just from a philosophical standpoint, proposing a system which, has part that we can't know anything, which means we couldn't know itself. But then it doesn't matter for the experience in personal life necessarily. Right?
Well, not only that, Michael, you got to realize that philosophy was set up as a way of analyzing things to challenge yourself. So that's just a philosophical thought loop that you learn in university. And it's helpful in the sense that it stops you getting too pleased with what you think. And it's nice because it's challenging, but it is just a way of thinking, and it has predictable results. Like you can't start thinking about something that way and come out the other end. Right? It's because it's designed that way.
Well, and there, of course, are systems who are not like self-referential like that and just not depend on themselves to work. They depend on something else. For example, if you have, which would be one of the questions as well, like in religion, like we would have God, which is an objective, ultimate power, and it makes things right and wrong. You have morals. Doing this thing is right, doing this thing is wrong. And if somebody asks why do we have those, why is it right, why is it wrong? Well, because God says it so, and it makes.
I see what you're saying.
You can doubt God's existence, but then if God's existence is
I got you.
It makes sense.
So what you're saying is it's a way of seeing a thought system that you accept because you accept it, not because it's based on anything.
Yes, like it's not that by accepting a thought system, I make the process of accepting it off in the first place, because it wouldn't make sense if I accepted that I could accept it. Like if I say, and maybe this is going too weird, but if I say, I think by thinking and reason or feeling or experience, perception, I say that we can't know anything about reality. We only experience thought. Then if that would be true, it would kind of, I would throw my own reasoning under the bus that led me to that statement. But I would suggest, if you're okay with that we move on to other topics. And you can have the last word, obviously, but just because...
No, I don't want to have the last word. I just want to run something by you, and given the way you're thinking about it, see what you think.
Yeah.
Because that's just interesting to me.
Right.
So here's what I've come to think, and then I want to know how it runs through that system.
Right.
See, the understanding I've got from being curious about these principles is that the reality for us is the nature of our mind that we are experiencing through thought that feels to us like it's coming from the outside. That is the reality. To me, that is the reality. So people say, well, there's nothing that's real. No. The reality is I'm experiencing my mind through my quality of thought, and it feels like it's coming from outside of me, when actually it's coming from something fluctuating and temporary. And it's a way, it's a varying experience of my own mind that determines my well-being, my suffering, my capability, my dysfunction, and that is the reality.
Right. Well, first question comes up for me, like, is there anything outside that? Like, because then the word reality would mean something different, right?
If there was something outside of me.
Yeah.
Well, here's my question to that.
Right.
Could it be that there might be something outside of me, but my experience is still an experience of my mind through the quality of my thought,
Yeah.
feeling like it's coming from the thing outside of me?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what makes sense to me. But if that comes out of what you're saying differently, I'm really interested, because that's kind of what I'm.
It would, for me, it would make a difference if, like, we experiencing only thought in the moment is something we witnessed so far and every single time, or if it's true. And to determine if it's true, it would be made sense to me to know, okay, what is outside of the system that might influence it? So if we don't know and have no clue.
Oh, so okay, yeah, let's talk about that, because and we might be getting off track. So you'll be the judge of this. Okay. But if you were to, in my frame of reference, so I'm interested in your thoughts. Yeah. In my frame of reference, if you want to, so I've got two things to say here. But in my frame of reference, the variables of the equation of Aaron Turner's experiences the nature of the mind, then whatever signal there is experienced through thought equals the quality of my experience. There are no variables there. There are no other. But what I realize saying that to you is, I'm interested in the quality of people's experience. So if somebody says, well, what are the other variables in my happiness? I would say none. There's no other variables in your happiness other than mind, consciousness, and thought. Okay, well, what are the variables in my stress? None. There's none other. Not only are the only variables creating your experience of stress or happiness or anything else, mind, consciousness, and thought. If you add another variable, it will confuse you and make it more difficult for you, because it doesn't belong. It's like having an equation that's wrong.
Right.
It won't crunch the numbers right.
Yeah.
But what I realized is, I am only really interested in the quality of people's experience. Now, philosophically, I honestly do think we don't experience anything outside of that. So even if there is something out there that is the data that's drawn on to give us that experience, but I'm not really personally that interested in that, because I think people live the quality of their experience of the reality outside of us, or the reality that we share, however that's made up. So if somebody says, well, I could have, this is so funny, I could have an extra $2 million, right?
Yeah.
That is not in the happiness equation. It's not in there.
I see.
Right? So I even had someone say, well, I've been working with an investment community and speaking at conferences and stuff like that. And somebody said to me, yeah, so-and-so's really got almost everything. You know, they've invested wisely. They're independently wealthy. They got a great family. They got great kids. They live in a really nice place. They have a really nice house. The only thing is they don't enjoy any of it. And I'm like, I think that's not a little thing. Because if you have it and you don't experience it in a way that you like, what's the benefit of having it? Like literally, what's the benefit of having it?
Yeah.
And I actually worked with somebody that said they thought because they were worried about money, they thought if they were independently wealthy, they would feel better. And when they made their first million, they did feel better for almost a week. And then they were anxious again. So they thought, well, maybe it needs to be 10 million. And he said to me, he said, when I made 10 million, I didn't even feel better for 20 minutes. So I said to him, so what's the plan? He said, well, maybe 100. The equation's wrong.
Yeah.
That's the power of these principles is in terms of the quality of experience, which in my opinion, that's all you get. Right? Whether you live in this house or that house, you get the quality of the experience living in that house or that house. Right? Whether it's blue or yellow, you get your experience of whether it's blue or yellow. Right?
So that's the big, cool implication. If all of that is working like that, if true or not, observable in huge, large amounts, it means that a nicer experience is around the corner all the time.
Yes.
Because it's independent of stuff.
That, exactly. And to me, that's all right. I'm going to say it in my way, but we've established that is true. And if see, this is the power of this understanding is, to me, that is true. And I've learned that from working with people. Like I've worked with people in circumstance where I think, no, feeling better can't be around the corner in this circumstance. And it turns out not only is it when people realize that the suffering was thought, even though the circumstance might be real, okay, and also when they feel better, they see and think totally differently. So it's not the challenge and the problem that it used to be. So it's not just feelings that change when feelings change. It's perception, it's thoughts, it's actionable possibilities, it's the event horizon that the person sees. Everything does. And that's why I think
The world must change because it's thought, right?
for them, yeah.
That's the point, I think, that I at least heard of, well, if everything we experience through thought as a substance, then the world can change in a blink of a second.
Yeah.
In the way that you said, your reality, our reality.
Totally. And it's really fascinating to see that, Michael, that when someone feels different, they see a different world, and different things are possible for them when they see a different world. Now, those possibilities might have been there, but when people are pressured and upset and rushed and stressed, they don't see those things the same way, if they see them at all.
Aaron, I can't believe I'm saying that, but we're running out of time.
What? Really?
It feels we just started, but
it does.
Yeah,
it does. We need to do a sleepover.
Well, maybe next time. we do a live stream. All right, so unfortunately the questions won't get lighter, but maybe fortunately. So here's the next one: is free will real?
So I've learned a lot about this in the last 3 years. This used to be a very unresolved question for me. So I'm going to tell you what I've observed. I don't think people have free will over what the principles are. Meaning, it's not up to you whether your nature is clarity and well-being. It just is, right? So, for example, if you're feeling really bad and you fall into ice cold water and you lose your concentration, if what I'm saying is true, you'll feel better until you remember what you were thinking. That's not up to you. That's just the way it is. It's also not up to you that whatever thought you put energy into, you experience because you're putting your concentration on that thought, right? So if we ruminate, we put we get more of the feeling of whatever we're focused on, whether it's insecurity or resentment or, right? That's true. You can't hold on to a thought forever because we just don't have the concentration that thoughts come and go. You don't have any free will about that. On one level, we have complete free will. We have complete free will how we relate to the thoughts that we have. Actually, we have complete free will. However, we might not think we do, in which case it's harder to use that free will.
Okay.
Right? And I want to say, that's it.
Go on.
Well, it's something you said earlier, Michael. Earlier on, you said something about who do I think I am. Did you remember right at the beginning? You said something about identity or who am I? Do you remember that?
I don't, but it sounds like me. So.
Well, on the one hand, and this is powerful. It's like I have thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that I do not feel like I have free will in the face of. But if I'm willing to consider, this is my experience, if I'm willing to consider, if I'm experiencing its thought, and if it's thought, I have free will as to how much time I spend thinking it, how much weight I give it, how concerned I am about it. I have complete free will about that.
Let me cut in here again with an even heavier question, I guess. So if we talk a lot about thought, but like, who are you having those thoughts, having the free will?
Yeah, see that's where it gets interesting in my, but I didn't know how to bring it up, so thank you. So I have free will in relation to those thoughts. However, the thing that I've been stewing on the last couple of years is I always thought that I was Aaron Turner. You know, so-and-so years old, grew up in so-and-so, lived da-da-da-da. I thought, Aaron Turner has free will in relation to his thinking, which is true. However, I'm starting to realize that what the principles point to is that I'm the mind underneath it. Now, I don't really know how to talk about that, but what's interesting about it is I think that's what we feel. It's like, my mum says to me that, every time she's told me her age, she's like, well, I don't feel that age. And I don't feel that age. And actually, it's funny because I had this experience when I visited Fenella's school. I was sitting, I don't know who was in the room, but one of the teenagers was talking, and I could see two things. I could see that they were really upset and reactive, but I could see underneath that they were very sweet and innocent. And then it struck me, shoot, I'm that way. I'm that way. And I realized that this is what made sense to me, is I think we're the essence part, that you called it the soul part, and that has a purity to it. And we feel that very strongly in childhood. And I thought that was childhood. But actually, when my mind's clear, I still feel it. So now I'm thinking, I'm that purity of spirit. And that's helpful because that's a shift in understanding that resolved the confusion for me, because I'm not thinking on behalf of Aaron Turner. In a way, he's just the avatar.
So he's thought?
Yeah. He's all thought. He's all thought. And if you, to me, I know I'm going out on a limb with saying this with you, Michael, the proof of that is that he's become more evolved over time. It's become more specific. It's become a stronger narrative. It's become a stronger identity over time.
Yeah.
And that richness and purity of feeling that's still there. See, I feel like it's an example of a misidentification that this understanding helps us clear up.
Yeah, what you said about that feeling of childhood, just actually being the feeling of you, that was beautiful. Like I actually, we talked about Fenella. I tried to advertise the video with her, and then I thought I'd wait till the next time I speak to do that. So if you want to watch that interview with Fenella, have a look. Not to you, but to you as well.
I'd love to
you
see
as
it.
well,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
to the viewers.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so who you just mentioned the soul. And I think when I asked you what the mind is, you said you don't know, and you can't answer it. Is it something else than thought? Who we are?
Well, no, I would say it's the essence of what we. It's a way of talking about the essence of what we are, the same way the soul is. That's my understanding. What I meant, Michael, is I don't think any of us really know the true depth and potential of that. That's what I meant. You know, so I've been interested in this for, 30 years now, and there seems to be endless levels of, I don't know, depth or clarity of mind that
Right.
you can.
Which would be like, if there's a truth, it's kind of infinitely far away from understanding. There's always more room to understand more, which again then parallels a little bit with the traditional view of God, which is interesting. Is that like when you talked about mind, it sounded, correct me if I'm wrong, like that mind informs like us, informs thought, informs consciousness, is kind of providing to it. So just to maybe finish up a little bit with free will. So if underlying intelligence provides insights, creativity, resilience, and so on, and thought is informed by this mind, and our actions are informed by thought, where is the space left that you talked about for free will?
Well, the way it looks to me, Michael, is we're experiencing that information from mind through different levels of, I think of it as thought distortion, clarity of thought. See, to me, that's what we're feeling when we have feelings. We're feeling the level of, you know how I said thought was the medium through which we experience the mind? So in a way, between us and our nature, thought's like a phone signal. And when it's a crystal signal, you hear everything really clearly without crackles. That's a very clear mind, a very rich feeling, because you're receiving the signal, you're experiencing the nature of mind more loudly and more clearly. As our thought gets more, I think of it as like distorted or contaminated, it's a worse phone signal. So in addition to the nature of mind, you're getting crackles, things are dropping out, and the equivalent for us is disturbed, uncomfortable emotions.
The question, like, tell me if I missed your response to that. For me, at least, still remains. It's like if I hang on to a thought or not, kind of sounds like also in your framework, like I do that if it seems to make sense, and I don't if I don't.
Yeah,
but then if it seems to make sense, it's kind of informed by thought, and then thought is informed by mind. So it all kind of seems like very deterministic, like in that sense. I don't see the gap for the free will.
Well, it works, but just because what you said is very true, it works that way. right? And I'll give you an example. If I have an insecure thought, right, and then I'll come to the part you said. If I have an insecure thought that maybe you're not trustworthy, right, and I'd buy into that, this feeling makes sense because he's not trustworthy.
That's very unreasonable thought, by the way.
Agreed. And my thoughts and feelings and perceptions will have doubt and insecurity built in by where every experience I have has doubt and insecurity built in, which justifies the lack of trust, which fuels the belief in the feeling, which fuels the thought. It is exactly the way you described it. It works that way, which is why you can't worry yourself out of worry. You can only worry yourself into worry. You can only anger yourself into anger. You can only doubt yourself into doubt. You can't doubt yourself out of doubt. Right? So that is true. Now, here's where the free will comes in my experience, is once people start to consider, I'm experiencing a thought version of life or whatever, myself, my life. The feeling tells me, now this is just what I call it, the level of clarity, right? Now, unbeknownst to people, I don't know if this is introducing something new, but unbeknownst to people, when we have a thought, these thoughts just run like a slide deck. You know, like when I was a kid, they used to have these slide projectors. Right? They run like a slide deck, but we have the ability to put our attention into any particular slide.
Can I go in here on if that would be true and we have that ability and we would have a decision to go there or not to go there.
Yes.
Then this decision, wouldn't it be informed by the world we're seeing as well?
Well, the way it looks to me, Michael, and you see what you think is, it's informed by the way we're seeing the world we're seeing. It's not informed by the world. It's informed by the spin on the data that we're seeing it through, right? So if you ask someone who's feeling anxious and seeing the world through an anxious lens and trusting that lens is reliable, that's where the free will comes in. Do you trust it's a reliable lens? And in order to do that, you have to know it's a lens. If you don't know it's a lens, it's pretty hard to decide whether to trust it. You just take it on faith, right? But if you decide to trust it as a lens, right, you will see the world in that way, right?
I guess I'll try it from a side.
Try it from another side.
If our
actually, you can say it the same way again if you want. I might have missed what you said.
I'm probably not even able to. If our decisions are informed by this spin of the world that we're seeing, but basically, I think fundamentally by thought, because there's nothing else, right? Thought is informed by mind. So
through whatever lens, through the lens of the thought.
Yeah. So that fundamentally sounds a little bit like a religious standpoint of the only way to change is divine grace in the end, because when mind decides to intervene through a thought, then a new thought might come up. And there's kind of the trick. You might be saying there are new thoughts all the time coming up, but what's the difference between me seeing opportunity and the willingness to go in or not go in? It must be informed by something as well, right?
Well, that it doesn't look that way to me. So I don't recognize what I was trying to say in what you just said. So I probably didn't. I don't know if
maybe.
Well, let's see. So in my mind, yes, we're getting, I don't know. Let's just say, as far as I understand, a random selection of thoughts.
Right.
right? A smorgasbord of thoughts, okay? Now, whether people know it or not, some of these thoughts, they don't treat like they're worth taking to heart, right? Like for me, when I had the thought of feeling really content, to me that looked unrealistic. So I let it pass me right on by. I didn't give it any credence, right? Now I had the ability to give it credence, but I didn't. That's nothing to do with mind. That's to do with wherever the locus of free will is in this experience. Is, I guess what I'm trying to say, Michael, is people don't realize, but their experience of their thoughts is determined by how they take them, right? Now,
which was the point we talked about.
Yeah,
right?
we did. But it all comes back to that. In other words, the reason it doesn't look like the religious model that you described is because of that. It's like, well, ultimately, I can have any thought and have a healthy relationship to it, and I can have any thought and have an unhealthy relationship to it. And the question is...
But only if I see.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The question is, only if I have the understanding to appreciate that.
Right. Which I can't get without it occurring to me.
Well, no, you could get it by listening to what we're talking about.
Right. But only if it occurs to me that might be relevant for me.
Yeah, or you want to try it out, or you're curious. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Again, there's that free will again.
It's just a question of what's at the first place of the chain, right? It just, well, maybe the next thing then there were, okay, let's say there is free will. Who would have the free will? Like, who's the entity? You spoke a little bit about you not really being you being thought as well, the way you saw yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what's left to even have that free will? Is it a question that is not not answerable? Or is it...
I think the reason I'm giggling is because I don't care. Like, I experience it, I can use it.
Yeah,
that's all I care about. Yeah. Like, I could sit and think about that for days, but I'd rather just not think about it and enjoy my life.
Okay, all right. Well, and you don't have to personally for me, philosophy is just big fun, and going in depth about how stuff is working out.
Yes.
I think trying to, and this is pretty in align with what you said, trying to figure that out so that there's a feeling of happiness or a feeling of arriving somewhere. That doesn't sound like a really good idea to me. Sounds like delaying it, as with the money example that you said, right? Because maybe I would, or somebody would figure that out, then there's the next thing to figure out, right? The same with the money. But then it does make sense to me for people to who are intrigued of what's going on, and it seemed to me that some are very open to jump into spirituality, others are very open to jump into psychotherapy, other modalities, without much proof, or without, some need a lot of proof, some need some relative to come and say, hey, this was effective. People have different things where it makes sense for them to be open to something. So I know at least a couple who are open to stuff if it makes sense in a logical way. And it seems to me, at least, that if something is true, which was a big question for us if that's true or not, but if something is true, and that truth, as with many Eastern spiritual traditions, is a truth that even transcends language, transcends concepts, then it's beyond logic, but it's not illogical.
Yes,
it must, if it's a 3D world and we have a 2D map, it must make sense, even if it doesn't explain the 3D world.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the reason I love to talk on. I don't think it's a good way to get happy, particularly if somebody is not interested into that, then definitely. But it's cool.
Yeah, no, it is. There's lots of cool things to think about. You're absolutely right. There's lots of very cool things to think about. And what occurred to me listening to you, Michael, is I think, tell me if this is what you were saying, but I think thinking about these things can be very cool. And as you said, is not the direct route to discovering the benefit of them. And for me, just if people are wondering, if you're wondering, the way I approached it was, I saw that these principles were being proposed as truths. And I thought, well, let me explore it for myself and see to what degree are they true? Under how many circumstances are they true? Under what conditions do they show themselves to be a useful guide to what's going on? And discover for myself in my own experience what seems to be a useful guide, what seems to be true, what seems to kind of, be a seemingly unavoidable repeating pattern. And so it's something that people can, explore for themselves, given that, they're in their mind all day long.
Definitely. And I can only recommend it.
Yeah, me too.
Because exploration is generally very fun. And in this case, it was extremely fun for me, also in preparation to speaking with you and other guests as well. So again, can only recommend it. I would suggest we'll do a little quick round to try to fit all the other stuff in as little minutes as possible. No, just feel free to talk a little bit long, but let's try to go through it. And I promise I won't ask you what the meaning of life is.
Okay.
All right. So modern psychology focuses heavily on trauma, cognitive reconstruction, and behavior modification. If the 3 principles are correct, how should mental health treatment fundamentally change? And what kind of empirical research would be needed to prove this shift scientifically?
Well, I know there are people working on the research. So I know innate health research is working on not only looking at So the first part would be, it's always seemed to me that the answer to mental health is to discover the unconditional, non-circumstantial potential we have for well-being in the face of any kind of thinking. To me, that's the answer.
Right.
We're walking around with it, and what's getting in our way is that we don't understand it. It's a part of the mind that's not on our map. People aren't talking about it. Everybody's talking about the way the world and other people are making them feel. Nobody's looking in the direction of, well, what's happening in me, and what's creating it, and can I have where's my potential for well-being lie? And a lot of people, you say, well, where's your potential for well-being lie? Most people say, well, I don't have it. Don't you understand mental health? So that's my answer. And there is research being done on that understanding as a mediating people's mental health.
Let me ask on science itself. It's based on measurements and observation. But if you're right, and reality is thought or shaped by thought, created by thought, what does that mean for scientific inquiry?
I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Because the direction that we've been talking about is really personal realization based. And so you wonder, well, how can science get involved in that? Yet it seems to be moving in the direction of consciousness. And consciousness not as a result of evolution, but as an underlying foundation for it. So, over the last 30, science does seem to be moving in that direction. So it does seem to be going there. How far they can go, I don't really know.
Well, there's certainly more scientists open to that. And how I see it.
Yeah.
because I mean, we don't have time to go into like the hard problem of consciousness and everything that comes to it, and that there are no other explanations. But certainly, it's interesting with thought how you spoke about it. You know, what to even, if that would be true, what to even do with that in science? Like, what would be the new?
Yeah.
Like, what would science even prove
if
thought plays a fundamental role in every person's experience? It seems cool and stressful. No, not stressful, and it was just wow, that would be a lot.
Yeah, and you wonder what the maths of that would be. I mean, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Right.
How are we doing with our quick fire?
Well, let's go to the next one. Some people seem to experience radical shifts in perception through sudden insight, while others struggle for years. At least in the conversations I had with people in 3P, it's not much different.
Right.
What determines when and how insights happen?
Well, I mean, the quickfire answer is I don't know, because there does seem to be an unpredictability about it. And there also does seem to be things that set people up. So, you know, if we're doing a multi-day program, to the degree people are open and stay interested and listen without getting distracted by their own thinking, that seems to really help.
Well, same question to that. What determines that, right?
Yeah, well, we're going to get in the same conversation.
Yeah,
because to me, whether people know it or not, they have the freedom to do that.
Right.
And oftentimes they don't know it, but they have the free, like, everyone, whether they know, from my perspective, everyone, whether they know it or not, is deciding how to take the thoughts and feelings they have. And so, you know, you could have one person have an objection and just hold on to it and not entertain another thought after it. And somebody else say, well, why don't I just forget about that and keep listening? In my opinion, they're both capable of both. They might not know it, but intrinsically, they're both capable of both.
Do we decide not to know it before we decide to know it?
I don't know. I'm personally interested in people waking up to their role in this, so they're able to use the freedom they have rather than just unconsciously using it and believing it's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah. If we would just decide not to know it, it's just kind of would seem that we could stop deciding at any time.
Yeah.
What question, like even like going to a 3 principles seminar or working with a practitioner or the therapist, is it even needed if we are also in terms of us always being just a split second away from a new experience of life with completely new thought? It's just like, it seems like, well, if that's true, and if there's free will, as you said, and if it's not just totally up to divine grace, you know, to give us an insight or an opening or anything like that, then it would mean that everybody at all times is kind of fine and perfect and could at any time have a beautiful experience of life, which then also would, in my mind, lead to just doesn't really matter what we do. Like it wouldn't be better to speak with you about something like this than to play around a football or go for a swim or do anything else.
Yeah, exactly right. And what you just described, we're considering that is all completely true. And we don't get to experience that because we get waylaid by the thoughts, by what I'm calling the more disturbed thoughts. Now, the reason of working with a practitioner, or in my mind, is there's a degree to which people lack the understanding to know that yes, that to me, that is true. Always. But the person doesn't know it. And the question I always have is, what would change about the way they used their free will if they knew it? That's all I care about. Because I don't like to see people living in a way they wouldn't if they knew they had more freedom.
I see.
So if someone wants to wallow their days away and they know they don't have to, they have my blessing. But if they're wallowing away because they think they have to, because of something that happened to them in the past, or because they live in a certain area, then that's a problem. So I want them to understand, no, it's the way you're relating to your thought. You have freedom around that. The potential you described is there. And then let them decide. That seems fairer.
But I get that. But it wouldn't be really a problem, right?
What do you mean?
Like, it being a problem is thought also.
Yeah, my thought. I'm going with that.
So no, just check. It's like, it's you made up that it's a problem.
Yeah, totally.
And you like
totally. Yeah,
okay.
totally. Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I made up that. Wouldn't it be better if people knew and they could use their free will more in their lives? And I made up that thought, and I made up, that's a thought worth. 100%.
Just checking.
Right, 100%. 100%.
All right, let's continue. Can AI become conscious?
I mean, there's two parts to this. So if it exists and consciousness is the base building block of this reality, then of course, in that sense, it is conscious, the way everything in existence is a function of consciousness. So that it has that. However, I'm not sure about the consciousness of AI. I don't understand that. I have lots of thoughts about it, but I don't understand it.
I take that. All right, I want to speak just shortly about your company, One Thought.
Yes.
Can you just say a little bit what you do?
Yeah. So many years ago, Mara Gleason and I founded One Thought with the idea of making this understanding more available in the mainstream. So for me, I could see that because this understanding helps with people's well-being and resilience so well, it would definitely be used for people that we think need help, right? But our vision for their help is to get them to the level of normal. And to me, the level of normal is not a free, clear, healthy mind, and it could be. So my other thought that I came up with and took really seriously was, wouldn't it be cool if the normal adult state of mind was a clear, healthy one? And there's no reason other than a lack of understanding that it's not. I think most people would like that. So we wanted to have that understanding in the mainstream. And within a business, a shift in clarity of mind has a huge return on investment, and it's really meaningful for the people involved. So it seemed like a really useful place to take this understanding was into businesses.
What are some of the most common mistakes, quote unquote mistakes, that companies do, large companies do?
In terms of?
Maybe particularly related to this misunderstanding.
Yeah, well, most people don't realize how distorted and unhelpful their state of mind is when they're rushed and stressed. And there's all these secondary problems. So you're not thinking clearly. The state of mind wears and tears on you. So you have personal problems like stress, distress, lack of sleep, drinking, burnout. Because people are more tense and speeded up, they're more sensitive, so there's lots of fractious relationships. So people don't get on very well, so they don't like each other, so they don't enjoy work. Like one of the main reasons people leave jobs is someone they don't like at work. And because they don't like each other and they don't think clearly, they don't work well together. So then you have these other problems that are kind of inefficiencies and dysfunctions within the actual organization. Right. And everybody accepts that this is the normal workplace because it is the normal workplace if people are in a disturbed, stressed state of mind.
Yeah.
But when they're not, it's not.
Which is kind of 3 principles and the implications in business.
Yes.
What I was always also just curious is if you take the business as an entity, like for example, best practices seems to me to be really huge lately.
Yes.
As a concept.
Yes.
Best practices seems to be a good best practice in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could imagine from the 3 principles view, you might have thoughts on that.
Well, yeah. I mean, the same happened in the leadership field. So when we first started working with the principles in business, there was research being done to find out what were the most effective leadership behaviors, and they distilled them and taught them to everybody, and it made no difference to the quality of leadership. It was so bad that it's been coined the great training robbery. and that's predictable because the quality of leadership impact comes from what I'm calling the level of clarity of mind.
So robbery because all those trainings with no impact?
Yeah, that's right. And it's exactly what we've been talking about. These principles allowed us to discover that the regardless of the behavior, the impact of a leader comes from the state of mind that they're in.
How do you I mean, you told one story when you worked with an army, I think you said.
Yes.
Which was funny how they reacted. How many people are, or how many staff are super open, super closed, anything in between, like think you're crazy immediately? Yeah. Like what do you have there?
Yeah, well, it does vary company to company. So there are companies that have cultures where people are interested in learning, they're open, they're enthusiastic, and then there are cultures where people are maybe shut down or insecure, or it's a very political environment, so nobody wants to, put themselves out there. And so it does vary company by company. And there does tend to be like a normal distribution, where a few people are super into it and open. The general are kind of whatever the average is, in that company. And then there are a few that are like much less interested, much more resistant to having an open mind. And so it tends to, be a normal distribution.
Yeah. And any other super fun story or impactful, inspiring story from working with companies that you have?
I mean, there's so many. The thing that blows my mind about it is we get to see, because we're working in a culture, in an organization, we get to see how many things state of mind affects. So, we've worked in companies where people say, well, what did they say? Goodwill is the norm. Because we don't blame each other when we feel bad, we kind of see it's coming from us. We kind of take accountability for it, and we kind of know we're not thinking clearly. We kind of take accountability, we get over it. And so we don't hold it against each other. So negativity, before understanding this, negativity was viral, that someone would get reactive and then everybody would, and then it changes to like, what do they call unconditional goodwill? We have a culture of unconditional goodwill. And then you get to hear all these just incredibly touching stories of what happens in people's families when they're less rushed, they're not living their family life by a tick box, and they're more present. And then it really affects their relationship, and it affects the way that their kids feel. I mean, it's just incredibly touching to see how much difference and understanding and a shift in the relationship to unhelpful thoughts, and a blossoming of that innate well-being and love and consciousness, whatever you call it. I mean, it's just an incredibly beautiful thing to see, and humbling every time. Like, I was at a business training last week, and one of the guys said, "So you're telling me there's no limit to my potential?" I said, "Well, I haven't found the limit. And I think as soon as we think there's a limit, we have to be careful, because you don't get to test the limit. You just assume it." But the way he said it, you could tell he saw that if you're willing to consider it's only thought in the way, and you don't have to worry about your thought.
Right.
You can just have it and let it run its course. You could feel he saw that. And it was really profound and touching to see that. It was, and like you said, Michael, he got that I hadn't really said that, but he got that. And it just really blows my mind the way these conversations can resonate with people in a way that they see the potential of their own freedom in the face of their different thoughts and feelings. And like we said, given the thought I took seriously, that does a lot for me.
Aaron, unfortunately, I miscalculated. I put a 6 to 7 hour mental image of our conversation into 2 real hours, and it didn't quite work out. So we talked a lot about philosophy, about spirituality, about we talked a little bit about foundations and of practical applications, and I feel there's so much more to talk about, but this is the last question. And the last question is, if you have any sense of something you would like to end with, and something that I haven't asked you yet, I didn't point to, like maybe there's something you want to end with.
Well, I think the thing that I would want to end with is what we talked about before, about there being a real rich, deep potential in the essence, in our essence, and just how powerful that can be, both for people's experience and for the way that they live their lives, and how available, how simply and naturally available that becomes when people take an interest in what we've called the 3 principles, and the relationship between mind and our experience and thought. And anyone who likes that, it's such a simple thing just to take an interest in something. You take an interest in it, and then the rest takes care of itself. So that's what I would.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I am really happy that you were here, Dr. Aaron Turner.
Thank you.